Visual Basic Express 2008 tutorial. VBE is an object-oriented programming language designed by Microsoft. The word basic is true in its meaning is a programming language for beginners.
Commonly we use Visual Basic 2010, but Visual Basic Express 2008 is also similar to the features of 2010. So first, you will open Visual Basic Express 2008. This is the Visual Basic Express 2008 window. And first off, let's create a new project by going to File and then choosing New Project. Now, in this case, I'm gonna use the title Tutorial for my project. Now, this is a screen for Visual Basic 2008 design form. Now, as you can see, it has many parts. Let's start off with this one. This is what we call the menu bar. From the menu bar, as you can see, this is like any Microsoft application. Microsoft Visual Basic 2008 provides a menu bar that you can use to select commands for your application, such as File, Edit, View, Project, Build, Debug, Data, Tools, Windows, or Help. Now, the next one under it is what you call the toolbar.
Toolbar, next naman below the menu bar, this is the toolbar which has the shortcut icons of all the commonly used commands in VB 2008.
For example, you have your new project, open a file, save or save all, cut or copy paste. Now, these are some of the new features that you can only find in Visual Basic. So there's the toolbox. The toolbox contains all the things that you can put in your form, such as you have here a button, checkbox, or label. Okay, it is consists of various controls that can be used to design the graphical user interfaces of the application. From here, you can just click on the option that you want. For example, I want to add a button. A button will be added to my form design. Now, another part is what you call the Form Designer window. This is the Form Designer window.
A design space which contains objects or controls used for the application. It allows GUI creation by providing the foundation for controls.
Okay. Next is the Properties window.
It describes the properties of the form, and its controls list all the properties of the object that's currently selected and gives you the opportunity to modify them.
For example, I want to change the properties of my button 1. And I don't want to name it as button 1. I want it to name as Genesis. You can edit the name here. Okay. So I'm gonna add your Genesis. Now, I don't want the name button 1 in my button. I wanted to add the word Genesis as well. So, as you can see, here is the text property and you can edit here. And there, you have your button for Genesis. Next part is the properties window. Here you have the object box, properties list, and properties value. Okay. Now, I think we are ready to start getting a code for our project. So today we're going to make a basic calculator in which we have the 4 fundamental operations such as add, subtract, multiply, and divide by using Visual Basic Express 2008. So for example, we're going to add 88 and 11. As you can see, the result would be 99 when they are added. And then let's try multiplying them. We have 968. Subtracting them, we have 77. And then dividing, we have 8. And when we click the button clear, everything, even the values in it, will be deleted. And as you can see, we can't input in the result. So, how will we make it in Visual Basic Express 2008?
And now let's proceed in making our basic calculator by having a new project. So let's rename it as basic calculator. Now we have the form. Let's proceed to the design of our calculator. Let's go to the toolbox, wherein we need 5 buttons. So we have the button 1. We can copy and paste this one so that we can consume less time. So yeah. Okay. Let's arrange the buttons. So okay. Now let's proceed to the labels. We need 3 labels, so we need to click this one. We can also copy and paste this one. Right. That. Okay. Let's proceed to the text box. We need 3 text box. Copy and paste. Now we have our design. We need to proceed to the properties of this label and button so that we can encode this properly later. So let's go to the properties. Let's have label. So we need this one. Rename this as LBL num1. Then let's change the text of this thing. Let's change to num1. Then next our label 2. Like this one, like the num1, let's rename it as label num2. Then proceed to the text as num2. And for our label 3, this somehow different from the 2. Let's rename this as LBL result. And let's change the text as result. Okay. Now let's proceed to the buttons. We have button 1, button 2 up to button 5. Let's change this into the addition, multiplication, and subtraction. So name button 1, let's rename this as BT and add. Then with the text, we can use the plus sign. For our button 2, let's rename this as BTN minus or subtract. Well, we can use BTN sub. Then for the text, we can use the sign minus. For the button 3, this is for the multiplication, so we can use BTN mul and the sign multiplication for the text, so asterisk to show that it is for multiplication. Then button 4, let's have BTN divide or division, so we can use the abbreviation DIV and slash for the sign. Okay. Now for this button 5, this is for the clear button. We should rename this as BTN clear so that we can have easy, so that it will be easy to have the code BTN clear. Then rename or change the text of this one as clear. Now the problem is that we need to change this thing also to have for the coding. So this text box must be renamed as text num1. it is necessary for us to change this so that we can be easily we can easily code encode the
Later.
and then this one we can rename as text num2. Then lastly, this one, as a result, we need to change this to text result. So we have the xt result. Now we're finished for the design of our calculator. Let's now proceed to the coding.
Now we are ready to encode the following basic calculator functions. Now, to encode, we're gonna have to double click the certain function or the certain button that we are gonna having a function with. Now, I'm gonna start with the addition button by double clicking on it. As you can see, the form 1 design has been changed to form 1 VB. Now, in this form 1 VB is the place where we're gonna be encode the functions of each design in our design form. Now, the first thing that we're gonna do is to add a declaration. Now, when you say declaration, it is where you assign the identifiers. And when we say identifiers, these are the names that we will be giving to our variables. Now, the variables are what we input in the first part, which is the num1 and the num2. Now, by declaring something, we're gonna start by saying dim, and then we're gonna add the identifier, and I want the identifier to be num1, num2, and result, and I will declare them as decimals. Now, we call this as decimal as data type. We have different kinds of data types. We have data types such as a string, as integer, as boolean, or other else, because this will be the function of your variables. Now, in this case, since we will be dealing with numbers, I'm just gonna stay with as decimal. Now, these num1, num2, and result are our variables for the things that we're gonna be encoding here. As you can see right now, you can just see the use of this, but it is really a crucial and very important part in encoding. Now, we're gonna start with the button add. Now, this is the part where we are gonna assign the variables. Now, since we're gonna assign num1 to the value of this text box, I'm gonna write as num equals to the value of txt num1 that text. Now, same goes for num2, which is the value of txt num2 that text. Now, since it is addition, we're going to add the two variables to produce the result. Now, I'm going to encode num1 plus num2 equals result. Now, lastly, as you can see, I have an error here, and when you can see when the Visual Basic can see an error in your encoding system, it will have such curly lines, which is something that you can see as well in your Microsoft Word. Now, this part is wrong because we are assigning the value of result. We are not assigning the value of num1 and num2. So we're gonna start first with the result part, which is equal to the value of num1 plus num2. Now, aside from that, we are now ready to assign the value of the result bar, in which txt result that text is equal to the value of your result. Now, you can see that it is already okay for the add button. Let's try using it. For example, with 5 and 6 here, and we're gonna add them. You have the right number. Now, By using the same codes, we can encode for the other functions as well. So I'm gonna do it for the subtraction part. I'm just gonna copy paste this part and change the value of, and change the fundamental operation shown here. Same goes for multiplication. I'm just gonna change this to an asterisk. And then lastly, for the division part. And there you have it, the functions of the four fundamental buttons. Now, the last button is the clear button. Now, we are going to encode the functions of the clear button. Now, this is a critical part since the clear button has different functions than the other four fundamental variables. Now, as you can see, we have here the same encoding window, but in this case, we're just gonna assign the functions of the text box. Okay, so I'm gonna enter here a space bar so that there will be no result. Same goes for the text num1 and text num2. 1 and text num2. I'm just gonna copy paste this part. And there you have it, your basic calculator codes. Now let's try using it. Now we have 56 plus 77, have 133, multiplying them, division, subtract, division. As you can see, since we save it as decimal, you can have decimal points in your answer. Now click and clear, so you can see every value is cleared. Okay, so now I'm gonna teach you another part of the properties, which is what we call the enable property. Now, this indicates whether the control is enabled. Now, since we don't want anyone bugging with the result part, we're gonna false the enable part we're gonna false the enable property of this result. Now, when we enter false, as you can see, when we run this application, we can enter the result. Now, let's try using it in the button. For example, I don't want someone to clear the values that I assigned. I can change it to false as well. And then when I run this function, I cannot click the clear button anymore. But since I don't want that, I'm just gonna change it to true. Now that is one property that is important when encoding, which is the enable property.
So after making the basic calculator, we will teach you about how to make a payroll computation. So let's have a new project. Let's rename this as payroll computation. So, okay. So in our form, we need to add labels like hours, rate, gross pay, deduction, and net pay. So click this label, then we can copy paste it. So now we have 5 labels for the hours, rate, gross pay, deduction, and net pay. So let's arrange this. Okay. Then next is the text box, wherein we also need 5 text box. Copy paste so that we can consume less time. There we go. Arrange this, align with the labels. So we have this. We need to add buttons for the calculate and clear. So add buttons, copy and paste. And of course, for our title, we should add one label for the title, which is payroll computation. So we have the label like that. Next, rename this labels, buttons, and text box. Let's proceed to the properties. So first of all, our title, which is label 6, let's rename this as LBL payroll computation. Then the text, we should have payroll computation. Now, so this is the title. Now let's rename this label. This label 1, LBLRs, and change the text to Rs. Label 2 as the rate. So let's rename this into LBL rate. The next, let's change the name of this one first to rate. So we now have R's rate. The next for the gross pay. For the gross pay, we need to change this into LBL GP for abbreviation. But here for the text, we need to have the full, which is gross pay. So next, label 4 for the deduction. Let's have LBL deduct. Then here, let's have deduction. And for the label 5, let's have, it is for net pay, so we need to LBL NP for abbreviation again. So here, use net pay. So we have the labels. Now, now let's have the buttons for the calculate and clear. Well, for the calculate and clear, it is the same as what we have done in the first part, which is the basic calculator. So for button 1, let's change this into BT and clear. Then this one is for clear. Okay, now this one, so we have button 2. So let's have, this one is for calculate. Then let's change the name into calculate. Now for the text box, we also need to change the properties of this. So we have this for the text box, change it to txt rs. This is necessary for our coding later. Then this one for txt rate. This is our gross pay. Rename this as txt gp for abbreviation. Now in the properties, so this one, let's change this to full so that we can change the value whatever it has later. Then next, this one, the deduction, let's change this into text deduct. Lastly, for the net pay, which is the result also, let's change this into text NP. So we have text NP here. We can also disable this part because this is the answer to the calculation, so we can disable this one. So here we go. This is the layout of our payroll computation. Let's proceed to the coding part.
Now, in encoding the following computation for the payroll, we need to know the parts individually. So the R's is multiplied with the rate so that we know the gross pay. Now, when we enter the R's, usually our R's is between 40 to 39 to until overtime, and then the result with the rate, which is the salary or the pay per time per hour, is the result for our gross pay. And sometimes you have deductions for our gross pay, and the gross pay will be minus with the deduction, and then you'll get your net pay, in which it is your final salary. Now, as you can see, we have different operations that we will be dealing in this kind of computation. Now, first up, we're gonna encode the codes for our button for calculate, in which when you click calculate, you will see all the results in it. So in Meet and Calculate, the first thing that we're gonna do is to assign our declarations. Since we have 5 functions here, we can also have 5 variables and 5 identifiers. Now, I want them all to be as integers. I'm gonna use R's.
Rate plus pay deduction pay. R's pay. Deduction. G pay for the gross pay and N pay for the net pay. S plus max. That's it.
As you can see, we can't have a decimal R's or a decimal rate, but since we will be dealing with money, it is better to use the decimal system rather than as an integer. Okay. So now, the first thing that we're gonna do is assign the variables. So R's is for our txtrs, that text. And then the next thing, and then the next one is for the rate. And go same goes for the deduction. And for the gross pay and net pay, we can have it the assigning of variables for the gross pay and net pay, since we are gonna compute for each. Now, the computation for our gross pay is R's times rate. So we're gonna assign GPay as R's times rate. But since we're gonna be dealing with numbers again, we need to add the symbol for the value, which is val, before each text. Same goes for the rate. And for the deduction as well. Now, for the gross pay, we're gonna need to multiply the value of rate and R's. And then for the deduction, we are gonna have for the net pay, you need to have the gross pay minus the value of your deduction. Now, lastly, we're gonna assign the value for GPay and NPay. Our GPay the GPay will be displayed in this text box, and we have named this text box as txtgp. So we have here txtgp.text equal to the value of your GPay. Now for the end pay, you're just gonna add as well TXT NP. That text equals to the NP. And there you have it, the codes for your BTN calculate. Now, let's try adding the computation for BTN clear, in which everything in this part is equal to nothing. Now, as you can see, we have here a line, so it means that we have a mistake. And same goes for the following one. I'm just gonna copy paste the following for the other functions. Now here you have the text hours and text rate. And then for the text rate, we have we're just gonna copy paste the following. And lastly, for the text deduct, the text. Now you have the codes for your basic payroll computation. Now let's try running it. For example, I worked for 50 hours this week, and then my rate is 65 pesos per hour. And then I have a deduction of 790 pesos. As you can see, my gross pay is 3,250 and my net pay is 2,460. Now suppose my workmates hours of work is 45, and just like me, he has a 65 pesos per hour rate, and then he has a deduction of 230 pesos. Or his final payment will be 695, and here you have it. For the basic payroll computation, which is just an application of your calculator.